Hello and welcome to Wilson Center Now, a production of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. I'm John Molesky. Today we present our Southern Voices Network for Peacekeeping Scholars Roundtable, and we have two guests who you get to meet. One is Florence Odiwuor, who is a lecturer with the School of Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Environmental Studies at Banko University in Kenya. And also joining us, Hyginus Okibe, who is a lecturer with the Department of Political Science at Enugu State University of Science and Technology in Nigeria. They're both part of the Southern Voices Network for Peacekeeping, which is funded by the Carnegie Corporation of New York. SVNP is a continent-wide network of 22 African policy and research institutes that works alongside the Wilson Center's Africa program to bring African knowledge and insight to U.S., African, and international policy on peacebuilding in Africa. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to learn about the research projects that both of our scholars have been engaged in during their time at the Wilson Center, and then maybe a little later in the program, learn a bit about their experience while here in Washington, D.C. So welcome to both of you. Great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Odiwuor, if we could begin with you, the title of your research project, Food Security Systems as Drivers for Sustainable Peacebuilding in Africa, the Case of Kenya. Could you give us an overview of the failing food system and the scale of the problem?
Thank you very much, John, for having me. I was doing an analysis of the Kenyan food system to be able to identify failures in the food system that are contributing to the issues of food insecurity, and as a result, violence and conflict in the continent. And my approach was to narrow down to Kenya. So for the case of Kenyan food security, Kenya has several failures in the food system. Kenya is ranking 86th out of 117 according to the Food and Agriculture Organization Global Hunger Index. Seems like it's ranking towards the last, which means the country is in dire crisis of food security. Kenya is one of the countries where a big proportion of the population are poor. It is said that 40% of the population live below $1 a day. Kenyan's food system production does not meet consumption. There's an increasing gap between the two. Consumption is higher than production. It faces low food productivity as well as low food supply and low diversification in the diets of most of the population. Other than low productivity, the food system in Kenya is dominated by smallholder farmers. Now, these smallholder farmers are the majority of farmers. They make a big proportion, and they produce the highest amount of food. It is said that close to 80% of the food that is produced in Kenya is done so by the smallholder farmers. The smallholder farmers have a lot of constraints. They are facing several challenges, like lack of access to inputs, lack of access to finances. They have very low land resources in most cases. And many of them, majority of these smallholder farmers are women. And other than the constraint faced by all the smallholder farmers, women have other added constraints. For instance, they do not own resources like land, which are important for agricultural activities. They do not have access to finances. In fact, majority of women are poor because they lack adequate education. They are overburdened by domestic roles as well as reproductive roles. And because of this, the women are usually not able to produce according to their potential. The smallholder farmers, again, most of them are an aging population. From my research, the average age of the smallholder farmer in Kenya is 60 years. It means that majority of the farmers are aging, and we do not have young people who are engaged in agriculture and that has created a gap between the ages. And what we are saying is that in the coming years, as natural attrition takes place, we will have no personnel who are involved in the food system and in food production. There are lots of inequalities in the Kenyan food system. Gender inequalities, the sector has excluded youth, as I've already said. There are exclusions where only a few people are able to benefit from the food system, and majority cannot be able to satisfy their needs. Majority are suffering from hunger and malnutrition. Undernutrition in Kenya is rising. Stunting has remained at the same level since 2018. Wasting has also not reduced. It has remained at 4% for a number of years. Wasting is mostly seen in the ASAL countries. Now, the Kenyan land that is used for agriculture, 80% is known as ASAL, meaning arid and semi-arid lands, which means food productivity cannot take place there adequately. Now, as a result of climate change, again, we are seeing a lot of climatic shocks. Lots of floods are taking place, persistent droughts, and this is especially in the arid and semi-arid lands. As a result, the livestock keepers have to move away in search of rangeland to the more greener areas where already we have farming communities who are living there. And because of this, tensions and violence and conflict results because of the resources which are not adequate for both the farmers and even the pastoralists. Land degradation is on the increase because of the poor and unsustainable farming systems that are being practiced in the country. Thank you so much.
So what you describe is, I mean, it's so multifaceted. It's so complex. There are cultural reasons. There are historical contexts. There are resource shortages. So where do you begin? Where is it possible to intervene in ways that could begin to turn the tide? Does the government need to be more active? Is there a role for the international community? Where have you identified opportunities to begin to create an agricultural sector within the country that is more able to match the needs of the populace?
Yes, thank you, John. From my analysis, I have identified certain leverage points, and just like you say that it is multifaceted, a lot of work needs to be done. But I will pinpoint a few entry points where government as well as international partners can be able to come in and formulate policies and develop actions, even to bring about solutions, to correct the failures and to promote food security. I will say that I will recommend to the country, the government, to upgrade the smallholder farming systems, support them, empower them, and build resilience so that they can be able to improve their productivity on a sustainable basis. And I am recommending that this can be done through initiating a food and agriculture for peace hubs within communities where smallholder farmers can be enrolled or recruited into, and then they are provided with social support where necessary against acute vulnerabilities. They can be able to be provided with new technologies or technology transfers. They can be helped to access inputs, access credits, as well as market linkages can be able to be created for the smallholder farmers. And I also want to recommend to the government of Kenya, because of this aging population, it is critical that the youth are enticed into joining agriculture and being stakeholders in the food system. And because of the low enrollment in agricultural programs in training institutions, as well as lack of adequate agricultural education at the basic education level, I want to urge the government to be able to expand agricultural education, as well as creating pathways for skills enhancement and capacity building for young people, entry into skills and professions in the food system, so that we can be able to have the younger people entering professions and careers and activities in the food system, so that as the aging population are moving out, then we have a new a category of young people who are coming in to continue with the work that the older people are doing, so that productivity in the food system becomes sustainable. I also recommend.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
That research is expanded, which means the government needs to increase funding. The Kenyan government has only funded agriculture minimally, and they have not met the 10% of the Malabo Declaration. So I'm recommending to the government to try as much as possible to meet this target of the Malabo Declaration, so that there can be funding that can be channeled towards promoting agricultural activities. And to the international community, I just making an appeal, kindly increase additional funding to support the government, informing the food and agriculture for peace hubs to be able to support the smallholder and empower the smallholder farmer to upgrade their farming systems to be able to increase productivity. They should also boost the government efforts in training and agricultural education by supporting education within the country, as well as opening international channels where young people can go and be trained out of the country, and then they come back to become a resource pool in the country. And I also urge and recommend to the government as well as the international partners to please provide funding for research, so that research can be enhanced and new innovations can be developed to bring about climate adaptive technologies that can be able to support the food system in becoming resilient to climatic shocks that we cannot run away from as a result of climate change. Thank you so much.
Thank you. When you talk about engaging the international community, are there nations that can be key allies that you've identified who are interested in investing or in assisting?
Thank you so much, John. I know U.S. is a trusted partner, and U.S. has supported the country in a lot of ways before, but we are just appealing to them. We know that resources may be inadequate and there could be other priorities, but I'm just recommending that please look at Kenya again and increase the amount of funding and the amount of support in terms of technical areas, and just come in to support the government and to support initiatives that will be able to mitigate these failures in the Kenyan food system, so that Kenya can move away from being food insecure to becoming a nation that can be counted as food secure. Thank you.
And we've heard a lot about, you mentioned climate change and some of the external factors that go beyond any weaknesses within the country. What about the invasion of Ukraine? We've heard that grain shortages are one of the unfortunate outcomes, and that the African continent in particular and the Middle East are disproportionately affected. Is that exacerbating the situation in Kenya?
Oh, yes, sure, John. The Russia-Ukraine crisis is exacerbating the food insecurity crisis in Kenya even further. Kenya is an importer of wheat from Ukraine, and that means that there's a shortage of wheat in the country now, and as a result, prices of wheat have skyrocketed, and it is not just wheat. Kenya also imports sunflower oil. Similarly, the price of sunflower oil has more than tripled, and the commodities are becoming unaffordable and beyond the reach of the common man in Kenya. Apart from that, the Russia-Ukraine war has impacted Kenya's food security greatly. We see that the global inflation that has resulted as a result of the war. We also see the fuel increases that has come up as a result of the war. All these have impacted Kenya's economy. And so the cost of fuel in Kenya has really gone up. Subsequently, prices of almost every other commodity and services in the country, like transportation, have gone up. And all these are impacting on the prices of items. And this is further pushing food security higher. We have said that Kenyan population is among the poorest in the world. We have said that 40% of the Kenyan population are poor. And because of this, the increases in prices are making them to become even more food insecure. But apart from that, fertilizers that are used in Kenya are also imported from Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And the cost of fertilizer is also becoming beyond the reach of the farmer. As a result, many farmers are opting to farm without use of fertilizer. And what is the end result? Poor harvests in the end. And so the future projects that food insecurity in Kenya is likely to continue and even to go beyond the figures that it is projected as at now.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for this, for your important work in this important area. It's a dire circumstance, and you've outlined the challenge, but you've also come up with some solutions, and we are really grateful for that. If you stick around, I have a few more questions for you later, but now I want to turn our attention to Dr. Akibe. His research is focused on herder-farmer conflicts and food security in Southeast Nigeria, plugging the gaps in the peace-building policy framework. Dr. Akibe, welcome. Thank you. Conflict between herders routinely occurred in many African countries, and it's not new, right? It's been occurring for over a century. Can you talk to us, for our viewers who may not be familiar, who are the herders we're talking about, and what's the source of the dispute?
Thank you very much. Nigeria is in West Africa. And in West Africa, we have a large population of Fulanese. In fact, across many African countries, their populations are distributed. They are amongst those that are classified as stateless people. And all the struggle over the years is to see how they can be located in a particular place. And that is why you see border crossing and migration from one country to the other. In West Africa, there is a protocol agreed upon that amongst the member states, they can cross border easily with their valid member ID card or passport. Mm-hmm. In many countries, especially Nigeria, where the border is porous, because we have over 2,000 and something border posts, which are not effectively manned. Most of these borders have become an entry point for most of these Fulanese without having any valid ECOWAS passport. Over the years, Nigerians have existed with the Fulanese. It was in 14th and the 15th century that Fulanese started migrating to northern part of Nigeria. And as time passed by, there were just cases of desertification, climate issues. And these people are nomadic and semi-nomadic group, though some of them live in the urban areas and engage in other professions. but a greater percentage of them engage in pastoralism. Pastoralism involves rearing of cattle and moving from one location to the other in search of pasture and water. It is not a practice that is concentrated at a point where you can talk about a ranch or cattle colony or roga, as it is called in Nigeria. So when they migrated to Nigeria and they met this harsh weather condition in the north, many of them were compelled to start to search for a greener pasture elsewhere. So it now compelled them to leave the arid area in the north and start to move towards the coastal area in the south. And in the course of the movement, their cattle is always destroying crops. And in the course of the destruction,
crops on land owned by others.
Yes.
Yes.
As they are moving, because they are moving to agricultural zone. And this agricultural zone, their preoccupation is crop farming. So when they move, the cattle will trample and destroy crops. For the past decades, there has been a means of settling these disputes between these pastoralists and the rural farmers. And this has to do with payment of compensation for damages. The Fulanis will spoil a crop or a farm, and the farmer will demand compensation from them. They have always kept that as a practice. And as a result of that, there has not been anything like a violent conflict of any kind. And what has been a practice over time is that when they get to any community where they wish to settle, they will report to the king or the chief or the traditional ruler of that community to register their presence, and they seek the consent of the community to permit them to live in their farmland within a range of time and vacate it. These are practices. The essence of their appearance is to acknowledge their presence in the farmland, because by virtue of living around your area of control, you become a chief security officer that is also overseeing their affairs. But progressively, we got to a point that the situation started changing. And the change started when violence became a common, phenomenon in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Following the collapse of security in Sahel region. In fact, immediately after the war in Libya and the defeat of the rebel forces, many of them started migrating with their weapons to other surrounding countries. So the level of proliferation of small arms and light weapons increased tremendously, such that non-state actors and individuals that are posing threats to state security could acquire arms with relative ease. So as a result, arms got into wrong hands. And these wrong hands now constitute themselves into terrorist groups. We have Boko Haram that has started terrorizing Nigeria as far back as 2008. So that kind of radicalism became a common infection that most of the religious groups that have over time professed issue of jihad, fighting holy war, and the invasion of those that are called infidels, it just became their preoccupation. So the arms provided them opportunity of executing that plot, because the state authority could no longer afford to provide the adequate security to safeguard the lives and property of the public. So suddenly,
can I ask you one question about, just to quantify this? If I read some of the stuff that you've written while you've been here, we're talking about 12 to 13 million Fulani engaged in these nomadic herding practices. Is that correct?
yes.
So it's a large number of people.
We have about 13 million of Fulani population in Nigeria, which is about 6% of the country's population. Not all of them are nomadic or semi-nomadic. Some of them are also engaged in other professions. But about 90% of them constitute the pastoralists we have in Nigeria. So they are in majority of those that rear cattle and move from places to places in search of pasture and water. So in the course of this movement, and because of widespread insecurity arising from terrorist activities everywhere, then most of these terrorists now infiltrated the Fulanis, and they started from the background to terrorize most of the communities that had been in peace. When they moved to the south, and I'm now coming back to southeast, because the first port of call is Middle Belt. It is when you pass Middle Belt that you can come to southeast. Middle Belt has been a hot zone for this crisis. You know the kind of pogrom they committed in Ajato. Every part of Taraba, every part of Benue, some part of Kogi, Niger State. These are the states that lie within the Middle Belt. They have all experienced this crisis and conflict. Now, Southeast has a peculiar history and a peculiar relationship with the Muslim Fulani. Between 1967 and 1970, Southeast was strategic in the civil war fought in Nigeria. Southeast declared their independence as Biafra then, and they fought a war of secession. Southeast was defeated, and that defeat has been a memorial something. It has been in their hearts. The malice has been embedded in them. Also, the Muslim Fulanis are also nursing bitterness against the Southeast people. Southeast is composed of 5 states, which are dominated by Igbos. These states are Anambra, Imo, Abia, Ebonyi, Enugu. And the unfortunate thing is that Southeast, which has this number of states, is occupying a land area of 29,388 square kilometers, and has a population of over 16 million. These are people that are resident in the Southeast. And Nigeria has a population of over 140 million as at 2006, because I'm using the accurate population figure, not the projection. We are now over 200 million. By implication, Southeast may be over 30 million. And out of a total land area of 911,000 in Nigeria, Southeast, made up of 5 states, is occupying a meager 29,388 square kilometers. Immediately after the Civil War, economic recovery efforts and development program was on the high side in the Southeast. And it has to, in fact, stretch beyond the immediate area that people were farming before, and got greater percentage of the remaining land that's supposed to be left for farming and pasture. So the remaining land is no longer enough for farming and pastoralism to coexist. And because of struggle for space, that is why the battle in the Southeast is intensive. So what has happened over time is that there are mixtures of reaction to the conflict in the southeast. Because one may be wondering, why would somebody not concentrate on Middle Belt, where the battle is too vocal? But the specific issue is that in southeast, the malice, which has been kept over the time, is now being emptied in this conflict. So people are visiting each other based on the malice they have kept. The Hausa Fulani, who are fending for their cattle in the zone, now stepped beyond their bound. And that is the source of the conflict, open grazing. Because they could not see enough pasture again, their cattle started feeding on crops. So this crop is a means of livelihood for the people of Southeast. About 96% of Southeast rural people are farmers. And they don't have any other means of livelihood other than through farming. And there is no support program that the government has instituted to take care of whoever that cannot fend for himself. So it is as harder you work as you would be, have something to eat. So that is the case in Southeast. During the COVID-19, the Fulani people migrated in drove to Southeast and greater southern Nigeria. It became a source of worry to the whole Southerners, because before then, the Boko Haram people and the bandits have started giving a warning that they are going to extend their terrorist activities to the south. So by that movement in drove, the whole southern governors became apprehensive of the situation. They continued to raise alarm. There was no safeguard to it. Rather, interest started playing out. People were defensive based on where they come from or based on the religion they practice. Southeast is majorly Christians. Those that we are just migrating, we are majorly Muslims. So religious meaning came into the matter. What is implied by this kind of movement? Is it to declare jihad? So Southeast could not understand. And they were making appeal to all the respective authorities, but this could not be addressed. Now, the separatist element we have in the Southeast, those who are agitating for separation from Nigeria, especially the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, they felt that the coming of Southeast was to repeat the event of 1967-70. So they built up defensive attack such that today what you see majorly is an attack between these separatist groups, especially the Eastern Security Network and the Fulanis, who have become militarized because they started operating with AK-47. And what has become a worry is that they commit arson, they commit of offenses of felony, kidnapping, raping, killing, attacking communities, destroying farms, destroying crops, and it became an indication that it is for a motive. The Southeast had suffered food embargo during the Civil War. So they felt that the coming of the Fulanis to launch such attack on agricultural zones and farm settlements is to regenerate the experience they had during the Civil War, where many of their children died as a result of malnutrition. So it is a complex situation where today.
So let me ask. I'm sorry for interrupting, but we're tight on time, and so I do want to ask each of you another question. So before you wrap up, I'd like to ask you, when you come up with recommendations based on your analysis, what are you going to do with these? How will you try to get people within the government and elsewhere to listen?
Yes, government has made some efforts, but those efforts are yet to yield the positive result. The National Executive Council of Nigeria, which is the highest policy-making body, sat over this issue of herder-farmer conflict, and they recommended that open grazing should be banned, which is a process leading to establishment of ranches, because modernization has imposed the responsibility on all cultures to adjust their practices to blend with the modernity. Most land that had lied fallow before are today occupied because of population explosion. And because of that, it is not everywhere that the Fulani cattle can have access as it was before. Now, the recommendation, government could not implement it. But it is very important that the National Assembly, which is the legislative body of Nigeria, makes a law banning open grazing. It is not a conflict that is peculiar to Southeast. It is the general problem that every part of Nigeria is suffering. So banning open grazing will reduce to the barest minimum the conflict between herders and farmers. The second one is establishment of ranch. Of course, the president has started the project in Katsina State, his own home state, by making a monetary budget of 6.25 billion. But it is not enough, because if you cannot concentrate the entire cattle of the herders in one ranch, so there are supposed to be expanded program where most of the northern states will have one ranch or two to concentrate cattle rearing and the cattle business. And again, there is a need for government to adhere to the Firearms Act that Nigeria has, which regulates the possession and use of firearms. If it is not fully implemented, what it means is that in the couple of years to come, virtually every youth in Nigeria will be armed, because that is what is being obvious. So the law enforcement agents and all the institutions of government that are responsible should come up and take proactive action to avoid this from escalating. Again, there is need for serious education amongst all the parties that are involved in conflict. Ignorance is a disease. Some of the acts which they commit is as a result of ignorance. The herder should be taught that the farmer has a right to live his own life. And the farmer should be taught that the herder should as well live his own life. The government should institute a program that will ensure that land administration is clearly defined, so that the allocation of land will as well be defined. And this definition will enable all the tiers of government to know which role they play at any stage. The governor is responsible for land in his state as provided in Section 1 of 1978 Land Use Act. But because of interest, there are some interferences. The federal government has superior rights to talk about land and allocate it as it pleases. So these are issues that are generating some concern. And there is politicization of this matter. People are debating and not being objective on what step to take to avert whatever danger that is implied. And social media has become another serious trigger for these issues. People are coming up with fake news. They circulate fake news. At times they circulate pictures of conflict and dead bodies and casualties and burning here and there to trigger conflict other places.
Well, you know, it's impossible in a format like this to cover everything that needs to be covered. And you make the point about ignorance being a driving force in a lot of these conflicts. So a question for each of you is, where can people find more about your research? Is there a place they can go online or where they can hear more about your work?
Yes, it will be published by Wilson Center Africa Program.
So wilsoncenter.org at the Africa.
Yes.
What about you, Florence?
Yeah,
is there a place people can find more?
My work can be obtained from the Wilson Center website.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So before we close, I want to ask each of you, in the important work that you're doing, has your time here and your involvement in Southern Voices Network helped you in your work?
Yes, it did.
Yes, for me, my presence at the Wilson Center has enriched my work. I've been able to do so much analysis and come up with a lot of findings. And I hope that from here, I will further this work and take it to a higher level. Thank you.
Well, that's certainly our hope as well. It's really, it's been an honor to have you with us during your terms as scholars at the center. And of course, as you know, you'll stay in touch through the Africa Program Network after your leave.
Yes.
But thank you for your time here. Thank you for your time today, and best of luck when you return home and continue to push for these important causes. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to thank our viewers for joining us as well. Hope you enjoyed this edition of Wilson Center Now, and that you'll join us again soon. For all of us at the Center and the Africa Program and the Southern Voices Network for Peacekeeping Scholars, thank you for joining us. I'm John Molesky.